Hey, what's up, you guys? My name's Tyler Rugge. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. So for today's video, we are going to be going over some of the pets that I have found to be some of the most neglected pets that there are. And you might be surprised by some of the things on this list. You might be surprised because it might seem like I'm listing pretty much every pet that is ever kept, and that is because there are a lot of pets that are often neglected or not properly taken care of, and it happens all the time, and a lot of people do this without even knowing it. And the reason for this, I think, is because a lot of the times there's very poor pet care portrayed in mainstream media, whether that be TV shows or movies or commercials. And also, pet stores tend to really lack proper pet supplies that are actually needed to take care of the pets that they sell. Pet store employees aren't properly trained to give people actual good advice on all the pets that they sell and how to take care of them. So a lot of the times, all these factors just end up in people not taking proper care of their animals. And there's just a lot of very widely accepted animal care habits that I think people have that aren't very good. So I am here to go over some of these things and just debunk some myths as far as pet care goes. And if you are guilty of doing any of the things I mentioned in this video, I don't want you to take this video as an attack on you personally or anything like that, because everyone makes mistakes, and a lot of these things are just things that a lot of people do. Therefore, a lot of people think it's okay. Standards for pet care are constantly changing, so there's a lot of things people might have done to take care of hamsters, for example, like 20 years ago, that isn't still acceptable. So I'm going to try to keep my rambling on each of the animals to a minimum because I have a lot to say, but I could easily make each of the animals on my list into their very own video. So I'm going to just go over some of the things that I think are the main issues with their pet care usually. Let's just get straight into the video. The very first thing I want to talk about is fish. So a lot of people, I think, know this, but fish are very commonly neglected as pets. I think a lot of people see fish as just a really easy pet you can get, just as an animal that you can like throw into a container of water and then that's how you take care of it, which obviously isn't the case. A lot of people, I think, treat fish as decorations for their house or as objects more than they treat them as actual living things. There's a lot of things that people do wrong with fish care. The number one thing, in my opinion, is people often keep fish in containers that are way too small or just improper in general. So the two main things I'm going to be talking about are betta fish and goldfish. So I'm going to try to make this short and sweet. Betta fish, typically people keep them in just really small containers or bowls even. Same with goldfish. So the first thing I want to get out of the way is bowls. Bowls are really bad for fish for a lot of reasons. First of all, they're usually tiny. Second of all, the rounded shape of a bowl is really bad for fish because it distorts their vision, and it can really easily stress them out because they can't see things in their tank and outside of their tank properly. Aside from that, pet stores tend to make a lot of really small fish tanks that are marketed as like these really small, cute fish tanks that don't take up a lot of space. And they're like 0.5 gallons or they're a gallon. And I can't name one fish that can be properly kept in a 0.5 gallon tank or a 1 gallon tank. Betta fish, people say, oh, betta fish live in little puddles in Thailand or whatever. That's not true. Betta fish really like to swim around and have a lot of space. The very absolute bare minimum standard for a betta fish is 2.5 gallons, which is actually quite a bit bigger than most tanks that people usually keep betta fish in. And me personally, I would personally recommend at least 5 gallons for a betta fish. I found that betta fish are really active. They like to swim around, and if your betta fish is healthy, they're going to like to swim around and interact with their environment a little bit. So a 5 gallon tank for me is a bare minimum for a betta fish. Aside from that, people often keep betta fish without a heater and without a filter system, and this is an issue because betta fish are tropical fish, meaning they live in warm waters, so they require their water to be around 78 degrees, and this can only be achieved through a heater for their tank. So you do need a heater for a betta fish, and you also do need a filter. The water has to be clean. betta fish can't just live in their own filth. And some people argue that, oh, well, I change the water every week. Like all the water, I do 100% water changes. And that's still unacceptable because fish can be shocked by a drastic change in the water quality. So if your water is really, really dirty and you take all the water out and throw clean water in there, it can actually shock your fish and kill it. You do need to make sure your fish is in a proper size tank, and that's a huge issue with goldfish too. A lot of people get goldfish, whether that be they get them from like a carnival or a fair, or they just go to the pet store and decide they want to buy a couple goldfish. Goldfish get significantly big. The main issue with fish keeping is people mostly not providing their fish with proper heating and filtration, and also providing their fish with too small of a tank, or even keeping their fish in a bowl, which again is unacceptable because the bowl distorts their vision. So just in general, fish are often seen as being these really simple animals that you can keep as a pet, but they actually require a lot of maintenance, and I would say they require a lot of research. And with any of the pets I mentioned, or just any pet in general, make sure to do your research. Don't just go to the pet store and ask for their advice, because pet store employees aren't usually well versed in all the pets that they sell. A lot of the times the pet stores tell the employees what to say and what items to push for certain pets, and it's not always a good thing. So always do your research online. I always recommend going on forums, watching YouTube videos, and just doing as much research as you possibly can. Even if a pet seems simple to you, there's probably more to it than you think. So moving on from fish, the next thing I wanted to talk about are parrots, or birds just in general. And I want to also throw in here that this list of animals that I'm going through are not in any particular order, so it's just random. So the next thing I want to talk about are birds. You'll find a common theme with most of these pets, and that is most people like to keep them in too small of a cage. So that applies to birds as well. People keep birds in tiny cages, and I don't know why. So to me, personally, if you're going to get a pet, you want to provide it with everything you possibly can and give it as much space as you possibly can provide for that animal for it to thrive in. You shouldn't be looking up bare minimum cage standards and giving your animal the tiniest thing possible because you don't want it to take up too much space or whatever. So a huge issue I see with birds is people keep birds in these tiny little cages that they sell at the pet store. And I don't know how anyone can see this and think it's acceptable in any way. People keep parakeets in these tiny little cages. I've even seen people keep conures in these tiny cages. But birds need a lot of space to explore and to be able to kind of fly around their cage and be really active. And aside from that, birds need a lot of toys and a lot of things to do within their cage. I've seen people keep their parrots in these tiny cages with like one perch and maybe like one toy, if even, and I just don't understand it. So the number one issue I see with birds is usually they're kept in small cages when they require a decent sized cage. I can show the cages I have my birds in, and some people even consider my bird cages to be a little bit on the small side. Some people think you should keep your bird in like a huge aviary, which is obviously ideal, but not always realistic. But as long as you're providing your bird with a very decent sized cage with a lot of toys and stuff to do, and also giving your bird a lot of time outside of the cage as well, you should be good. But those small bird cages are just completely unacceptable. Another thing people often do wrong with birds is not giving them proper attention. Birds require hours every single day of one-on-one attention. Birds like to be around people all the time. They're very social animals, and they just really need attention in order to thrive. If your bird is not getting enough social interaction every single day, it can actually make your bird depressed, and it can lead to health issues like self-mutilation, not eating, and ultimately it can actually result in a bird's death. So if you have a pet parrot, make sure you're giving them a lot of social interaction. And I mean, there's a few other things that people do wrong with birds, but another big one I just wanted to mention is people often don't give their birds proper diet. So some of this depends on your species of bird specifically, but typically most parrots require a high quality pellet for their main staple, as well as fresh fruits and vegetables. whereas I've seen a lot of people just give their birds a seed mix, and seed mixes, although your bird can survive off of it, it ultimately isn't very nutritious, and it's just not a balanced diet for your birds. So if you're feeding your bird just a seed mix, then I would recommend trying to switch them over to a high quality pellet and also feeding them a lot of fresh foods as well. So the next animal on my list is hamsters. So hamsters, God, hamsters are like, I would say, the main pet that parents like to get for their child. So a lot of kids like to get hamsters because they're small, cute, furry little animals. People just figure you can keep them in a small cage. They're relatively easy to take care of. They don't live very long, so it's not a long commitment. And typically, I would say most people who get hamsters tend to just go to the pet store, buy a hamster cage, buy some hamster food, maybe get a wheel and a couple toys, and pretty much just follow whatever the pet store employee says you need to get, which is a common theme in this video, and that's wrong because pet stores don't always sell all the proper things. So the number one issue, in my opinion, with hamster care is people often keep them in way too small of cages. So just to kind of give you an idea of what I'm talking about, what's considered the bare minimum for a hamster is around 450 to 650 square inches. And this has to be continuous square inches, so 450 square inches like straight across that your hamster can run across. So if you're getting a hamster cage that is 2 or 3 stories and all of the floors add up to 450 square inches, then that doesn't count. It has to be continuous floor space. So one of the most popular hamster cages probably to get are critter trails. Now critter trails are these little colorful, pretty, I think they're tacky, but cute little hamster cages that are colorful and fun, and you know, they're marketed for hamsters, right? So they make critter trails in all different sizes and shapes and stuff. I think there's a 1-story one, a 2-story one, blah blah blah, but they aren't the proper size for hamsters. So the 1-story critter trail that's just one floor is 200 square inches. So going back to the minimum, which is at least 450 square inches, the small critter trails are not even half of the minimum for hamsters. And again, usually you want to go even bigger than the minimum. So needless to say, critter trails are just completely unacceptable. The only critter trail that is okay for a hamster to live in is the critter trail super habitat, which is actually something that they came out with very recently. And the critter trail super habitat is 540 square inches, which is, you know, it falls in the range of the minimum for a hamster. It was like a big deal kind of when critter trail came out with this, which is kind of insane to think about, that it was like revolutionary that a company that makes hamster cages came out with a cage that was big enough for a hamster. Like, that's bad. But in reality, I guess good on Critter Trail for finally coming out with an acceptable hamster cage. So if you're gonna get a critter trail, make sure it's the critter trail super habitat that's at least 540 square inches. Other than that, pretty much all the other critter trails are garbage and I wouldn't recommend them. And aside from that, a lot of people like to keep their hamsters in a 40-gallon breeder tank, which equates to being 648 square inches. And I think this is amazing. I think people who keep their hamsters in a 40-gallon breeder, that's like absolutely amazing because that's, you know, that's bigger than the minimum for a hamster, what they actually require. So you're giving your hamster a decent amount of space and they will utilize it. Trust me, your hamster will run around and they will be so happy. You don't even have to buy a tank or a cage from the pet store. You can go to Walmart and buy a big plastic tub and you can make a bin cage for your hamster and it will be even bigger. It might not look quite as nice, but you can customize it and make it look really cool and make it look like whatever you want it to look like. And your hamster will love it because they have a ton of space. So that's just something to keep in mind. But aside from just hamsters being kept in tiny cages that are way too small, some people use wire wheels for hamsters, which are dangerous because your hamster can get their feet caught in the wires. So if you have a wire wheel for your hamster, make sure you're switching it out for a wheel that's just all plastic so that your hamster can't get their feet caught in them. The next thing I want to talk about on this list is rabbits. Once again, can you guess what the number one issue I have with people who keep rabbits? It's that they keep rabbits in tiny cages. Number one, first and foremost, do not keep your rabbit on a wire bottom cage. They make cages that have wire bottoms with a tray underneath that makes it easy because the poop falls through and it's easier to clean up. But if you keep your rabbit on a wire bottom cage, it will most likely end up with sores on its feet that can get infected if left untreated. So just overall avoid wire bottom cages, okay? Now that we got that out of the way, people keep their rabbits in small cages. I don't know why at the pet store they sell rabbit cages that are just like these small little rectangle cages, but people do. There isn't really a set in stone minimum for rabbits. I think it's a very widely debated topic as for how they should be kept. But I did find a graphic that kind of explains how rabbits should be housed, and I'm going to put that on the screen over here so you can take a look. So it's saying that the living space for a rabbit should be 12 square feet. And keep in mind with this that this probably applies to smaller rabbits. So if you're like me and you have a Flemish giant, they're going to want more than 12 square feet, trust me. Then there's exercise space. So there's living space, and this might be where you keep your rabbit at night or whenever you can't watch them. But then your rabbits need an exercise space that they can actually like run around and exercise in, because rabbits love to run, they love to sprint, they love to jump. So they require a lot of exercise and stimulation. It says at least 32 square feet for exercise space. And then it gives you just some examples of like different cage sizes and their square feet and stuff. So I personally, what I recommend for rabbits is keeping them in a playpen. So just have an area, like a pretty decent sized area gated off that you can keep your rabbits in at all times, that will give them room to kind of run around and play in and just live comfortably. And then you can also have an area of your house that is rabbit proofed so that you can let them out there supervised, that they can run around and play and exercise. And that might seem like a little bit extra for rabbits to people who don't have experience with them. But if you're not willing to do those things for your rabbit, you simply just shouldn't get a pet rabbit. So for my rabbits, I have them in a room that is half fenced off, and they're in their own big playpen area, and that's where they live. They have enough room to run around and play and jump and have a good old time. And then whenever I can supervise them, I actually let them out and they can run around my house kind of, and they can get exercise that way as well. If you're gonna get a rabbit, overall, you just need to do your research on what kind of rabbit you're getting, how big it's gonna get, and therefore how much space it needs. But I would recommend having a living space for your rabbit, and then also having a much bigger exercise space that your rabbit can be in supervised, because rabbits do need a lot of exercise and they do love to run around. And it's really cute to see a happy rabbit running around. It's much more fun than keeping them in a tiny cage. So another thing with rabbits is improper diets. A lot of people just feed their rabbits like pellets all the time, which isn't good. A lot of people are inclined to feed their rabbits carrots when carrots are actually really bad for rabbits. Rabbits thrive off of a diet of mostly hay and also some fresh vegetables, and you can also give them some high quality rabbit pellets as well. The last thing about rabbits that I want to talk about is they're actually social animals. So a lot of people go out and they just get one rabbit, and that's actually not good because rabbits live in groups in the wild. Rabbits are really social, and it's just really bad for them to be kept alone. So there are some cases where there might be a rabbit that doesn't necessarily get along with other rabbits, and you might try to bond them with other rabbits and they just don't like other rabbits. In that case, I would say is the only case it'd be okay to keep your rabbit alone, is if you've actually tried multiple times to bond it and it didn't work out for whatever reason. Maybe your rabbit's aggressive towards other rabbits. Then maybe you should keep your rabbit alone. However, if you do keep your rabbit alone, you need to make sure you're giving them a lot of one-on-one time, a lot of social interaction, because they are very social animals. But if your rabbit is capable of being socialized with other rabbits, then that is the route I would go, because rabbits interacting with each other is not the same as a human interacting with a rabbit. Rabbits get so much more out of relationships with other rabbits. So if you currently have a rabbit that's alone, I would recommend taking your rabbit to a local rabbit rescue, and usually they'll let you try to match up your rabbit with another rabbit and see which one they get along with. Sometimes if you go to rabbit rescues, they will have pairs of rabbits that are already bonded, and that's like the easiest thing ever because then they already like each other, so you can just take them in. But yeah, there are sometimes rare cases where rabbits won't get along with other rabbits, and in that case, I guess it's okay to keep them alone. But if possible, I would always recommend trying to bond your rabbit with another bun. I wanted to talk about guinea pigs, and this one's going to be pretty short and sweet because, again, the main issues with guinea pigs are the same with a lot of the other animals. Number one issue with guinea pigs is that they are often kept in cages that are way too small. I don't know why, but at the pet store, hello, they sell these tiny guinea pig cages, or I guess they're usually cages marketed towards small animals, but then they have like a picture of a rabbit and a guinea pig and like a ferret on it, and you should not keep your guinea pig in one of those small rectangular cages. It's so sad looking, like, and I don't get how people even look at that and they think it's okay, because the cage is literally big enough for your guinea pig to like sit in the corner and look sad all the time. So I don't know why you would think that's acceptable. I am not an expert on guinea pigs. I've never owned guinea pigs before, but from what I read online, the very bare minimum for a guinea pig is from 8 to 10 square feet. And again, even in this range, people usually recommend 10 square feet as opposed to 8. You always want to go bigger the better. If you can do more than 10 square feet, I would give your guinea pigs as much room to run around as they possibly can. So again, aside from the small cage thing, guinea pigs, just like rabbits, are social animals that a lot of people just keep alone, which is actually bad because, again, in the wild, guinea pigs live in groups. They're very social animals. They love to interact with each other. So you always want to try to get at least 2 guinea pigs so that they can bond with each other and be friends. And again, like I said with the rabbits, there might be rare cases where your guinea pig fights with other guinea pigs and hates them and doesn't want to be around anyone. In that case, I guess it's okay to keep them alone, but again, just make sure you're having a lot of interactions with your guinea pig and playing with them every day so that they're getting social interaction, because again, they definitely benefit from it. So that is my spiel about guinea pigs. Last but not least, I'm going to be talking about turtles. So yes, turtles are very commonly neglected. I would say they're probably up there with one of the most neglected animals. I think the reason for this is people often go to the pet store and they see a little turtle, they think it's cute, so they buy it, and they don't realize how big these turtles get and how much room that they actually need and how active they actually are. So I'm just going to tell you guys what a turtle needs, and you can probably piece together what people are doing wrong. So I'm going to be talking specifically about red-eared sliders because obviously all turtles are different. I can't just say this applies to all turtles. But red-eared sliders, amongst a few others that are a similar species, fall under this pretty similar care requirements. So red-eared sliders are also one of the, I would say they're probably like the most commonly kept aquatic turtle species. So I'm just going to be going off of that. So red-eared sliders require 10 gallons of water per inch of shell. If your turtle's 1 inch, it needs 10 gallons. If your turtle's 5 inches, it needs 50 gallons. And red-eared sliders can get around 10 to 12 inches big. So that would mean that minimum they need around 100 to 120 gallons of water. And I can show you my turtle tank. I have a yellow-bellied slider who is in a tank that's about 125 gallons. It's a very large tank that I would say, again, not the average person is going to want to have a tank that big in their house, usually. But if you're going to get a aquatic turtle, usually you're going to need a tank that big. And on top of having a 120-gallon tank, they also need an area on top of the water that they can go up and bask on, and they need a basking bulb that provides them with heat as well as UVB. So a lot of people like to go with mercury vapor bulbs because they're a basking bulb that provides a lot of heat as well as UVB. The UVB helps them process calcium to keep their shells nice and strong. And a lot of people tend to also keep them with just random light bulbs or heat lamps that don't provide proper lighting for a turtle. So then their shells end up getting all deformed. Another thing is turtles produce a lot of waste, and since they're, producing waste in a pool of water that they're swimming in, you need to have a really high power filter that filters the water and keeps it nice and clean for your turtle. Unfortunately, a lot of turtle setups just tend to be very sad. People keep them in really, really small, like 20 or 30 gallon tanks with these small filters. And I don't know how they can like see a turtle in that kind of space and think it's okay, but people do. My turtle actually came from a situation like that. My turtle is around 12 or 13 years old, and its entire life it was kept in a 20-gallon tank, about this much water, and a regular light bulb, like lamp, like for your desk, like not the proper light bulb for a turtle. And I don't know how it lived, but it had a lot of problems eating. It didn't know how to swim, and it took me a while to like nurse it back to health and get it to be like a normal turtle for the most part. But right now he is thriving in his 120-gallon tank. Another thing with turtles too is they also have really long lifespans. Red-eared sliders can live at least 20 years, I read, but they also live longer than that. A lot of the times, if you keep them really well and healthy, they can live a lot longer than 20 years. So they are a long-term commitment as well. So that's another thing, is people might get a turtle and have it for, 10 years, which is still a long time. And then they're like, wow, I like don't want to take care of this anymore. And then, what happens to the turtle? That's something that people need to keep in mind more when they're getting animals. So yeah, that is it for pets that are often neglected. There are probably some I've left out in this video. If there's any I didn't mention that you would like to add, please leave them in the comments below. I'd love to hear about other animals. I don't love to hear about it, but I think it's a good learning experience for people to, hear what people are often doing wrong with their pets. So if you have any others that I didn't mention, make sure to leave them in the comments below. If you guys like this video or you found it to be helpful, make sure to give it a big thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel. I post videos every week with my animals. And also check out all my social media links. Those will be linked down in the description below. And I will see you guys in my next video. And also note that my videos usually aren't this like depressing. I just like don't know how to talk about this and sound like excited about it, because it makes me genuinely sad. So I'm sorry if this one is a downer, but I felt like it was something that I wanted to talk about. So I hope you guys at least found it a little bit interesting. Yeah. All right. Bye.